I was literally shocked when I saw a 9-year-old walking down a busy London street completely alone. He was wearing a tiny blazer, a perfectly knotted tie, and carrying a massive backpack. There was no parent in sight, no minivan idling at the curb, just a kid navigating public transport and busy intersections like a tiny corporate executive. In the US, someone would have called Child Protective Services, but here in the UK, that is just a Tuesday. I am Olivia. I moved from the States to Britain about 2 years ago, and I love it here. But there are moments when I look at how the British raise their children, and my American brain completely short circuits. The culture shock is real. We need to talk about this because the differences are not just about calling a stroller a pram or a pacifier a dummy. They are fundamentally different philosophies about how to raise a human being. I have spent the last 2 years observing, asking questions, and digging into the history of why British parents do things that would send American parents into a full-blown panic. And I have narrowed it down to 9 unwritten rules of British childhood that absolutely shock American expats. Rule number 1 is what I call the independent commute. In America, we are the masters of the school drop-off line. We have crossing guards, traffic cones, and strict policies about signing your kid in and out. In many US states, if you let a 10-year-old walk to the park alone, you are risking a visit from the authorities. We have this deep psychological fear baked into us from the stranger danger panic of the 1980s and 90s, but British parents have a totally different legal and cultural framework. In the UK, the law does not specify an exact age when a child can be left alone or walk to school. It simply says they should not be placed at risk. Therefore, it is entirely up to the parent to judge their child's maturity. By the time kids hit year 5 or year 6, which is around 9 or 10 years old, a massive percentage of them are walking or taking the public bus to school by themselves. The psychological analysis here is fascinating. British culture places a high value on developing common sense early. They believe that sheltering a kid from the real world does not make them safer, it just makes them naive. By letting them navigate the local corner shop or the bus route, they are teaching them spatial awareness and street smarts. It is terrifying for an American to watch, but it actually builds incredible resilience. Rule number 2 is the sacred 7 o'clock lockdown. Here is the truth about British bedtimes. They are ruthlessly enforced. In the US, it is completely normal to see kids at a restaurant with their parents at 8 or 9 at night. American childhood often revolves around the family unit doing everything together in the evening. You have soccer practice until 6, family dinner at 7:30, and maybe the kids fall asleep by 9. In the UK, 7 in the evening is the cutoff. Kids are bathed, read to, and put in bed. Period. The rest of the evening is legally and culturally designated as adult time. This traces back to the historic British class system and the nursery culture of the upper classes, where children were largely unseen in the evening. Obviously, modern British parents are incredibly hands-on, but that boundary between child life and adult life remains rock solid. They do not view their children as miniature adults who should be included in late evening activities. They view sleep as a non-negotiable pillar of health. And frankly, they want to drink a glass of wine without watching Peppa Pig. At first, I thought this was incredibly rigid. But honestly, seeing how rested these kids are and how sane the parents are, I am starting to think the British might have figured out the secret to preserving your marriage. Rule number 3 is the toddler corporate uniform. In the US, we would never put a 4-year-old in a V-neck sweater, a collared shirt, and a tie just to go learn their ABCs. Public school kids in America wear sweatpants, graphic tees, and light-up sneakers. But here, children start primary school in a year called reception when they are just 4 years old. And almost every single school requires a strict uniform. I am talking tiny cardigans, tailored shorts, pinafores, and polished black shoes. You have to look at the historical context to understand why this rule is so absolute. School uniforms in England date back to the 16th century. The very first uniforms were given to impoverished children at the Christ Hospital School to provide them with durable clothing. Over the centuries, the uniform evolved into a great equalizer. The British logic is that if everyone is wearing the exact same navy blue jumper, you instantly strip away visible class differences. You eliminate the bullying that happens when one kid wears designer clothes and another wears hand-me-downs. It also removes the morning argument about what to wear. Yes, it looks absolutely absurd to see a 4-year-old dressed like a tiny accountant running through a muddy field, but the social leveling it provides is actually brilliant. Quick thing before we get to the worst 2 on this list. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Rule number 4 is the ruthless lunchbox policing. If you pack a lunch for your kid in America, you throw in a Lunchable, a juice box, maybe a bag of Doritos, and a cookie. As long as it is nut-free, nobody cares. In the UK, bringing a packed lunch is subject to rules that feel like a military inspection. Many British schools have completely banned chocolate, crisps, and sugary drinks from lunchboxes. If you try to send your kid to school with a standard American-style fruit snack, a teacher might literally put a sad face sticker on it and send it back home with a note. This drastic shift happened in the mid-2000s. A famous British chef named Jamie Oliver launched a massive television campaign exposing the poor nutritional quality of school dinners. It sparked a national outrage that completely reshaped government policy and school guidelines. The UK government even introduced a sugar tax a few years later. So now British parents are packing things like hummus, carrot sticks, wholemeal wraps, and plain water. It feels incredibly strict when you are used to the freedom of throwing a pre-packaged snack into a bag, but the national commitment to fighting childhood obesity at the structural level is something you have to respect. Rule number 5 is taking babies to the pub. I need to paint a picture for you. It is 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday. You walk into a cozy, dimly lit British pub. People are drinking pints of ale, and right there in the middle of the room, parked next to a wooden table, is a massive baby pram. A toddler is colouring quietly in a high chair while eating a Yorkshire pudding, and the parents are happily sipping their drinks. In America, taking a baby to a bar is a massive taboo. People would judge you relentlessly, but in the UK, a pub is not a bar. This is a crucial cultural nuance. Pub is short for public house. Historically, these were the living rooms of the community. Before houses had central heating, people gathered around the pub fireplace to stay warm, socialise and eat. Therefore, taking your kid to the pub on a weekend afternoon for a Sunday roast is considered wholesome family bonding. British society integrates children into adult spaces rather than banishing them to brightly coloured screaming zones like Chuck E. Cheese. The kids learn how to behave in a public adult-oriented environment. They learn that they are part of a community, but they are not the centre of the universe. Also, this is exactly the kind of thing I go much deeper on with the people who support this channel directly. So if you are sitting there thinking, okay, I need the fuller version of this story, join the membership below. That is where I share the deeper thoughts, the more personal side of all this, and the extra bits I cannot always fit into the main videos. This brings me to rule number 6. Rain does not exist. Well, obviously it rains constantly in the UK, but what I mean is that rain is never an excuse to stay inside. In the US, if it is pouring rain and 40 degrees, school recess is immediately moved to the gymnasium. We keep our kids warm, dry, and sterile. The British completely reject this. They live by a Scandinavian philosophy that says there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. From the moment they can walk, British children are zipped into waterproof puddle suits and shoved out the back door. There is a massive movement here called Forest School. It is integrated into early years education. Kids spend hours outside in the woods, in the freezing mud, building dens, holding worms, and jumping in massive puddles. The psychological benefit here is huge. It teaches children that discomfort is temporary and manageable. It builds robust immune systems and physical confidence. If British parents waited for perfect sunny weather to send their kids outside, the kids would be indoors for 9 months of the year. So they just ignore the sky, put on their wellies, and embrace the damp. If you are loving this culture shock journey and want to see more content like this, please hype up this video by hitting the like button and leaving a comment. It really shows your support, tells me you love what I am doing, and helps the channel grow so much. Rule number 7 is what I like to call bench parenting. Go to any playground in suburban America and you will see parents hovering 3 inches behind their toddlers on the climbing frame. We spot them on the slide. We catch them before they hit the wood chips. We orchestrate their turn taking. Go to a British playground and the parents are sitting on a bench 30 feet away, drinking a flat white from a paper cup, having a full conversation while their child hangs upside down from a rope swing. This difference comes down to legal structures and litigation culture. America is a highly litigious society. If a kid falls off a swing set and breaks an arm, the school or the city could get sued for millions. That fear trickles down to the parents. We are terrified of injuries and terrified of being judged as negligent. The UK is much less litigious. The government agency that oversees health and safety actually published guidelines stating that playgrounds should offer managed risk. They argue that if you remove all danger from a playground, children will not learn how to assess risk for themselves. British parents will watch their kid climb a slightly dangerous tree, wait for them to figure it out, and only step in if actual death is imminent. When a British kid falls down and scrapes a knee, the parent does not sprint over with an ice pack. They yell across the park, "You are fine, brush it off." And you know what? The kid usually just brushes it off. Rule number 8 involves language boundaries and the concept of cheekiness. In America, we are weirdly puritanical about language around children. If a parent drops a mild swear word in front of a kid, they gasp, cover the kid's ears, and apologize. We demand very earnest, polite responses from our children. Yes, sir. No, ma'am. British culture operates on a totally different frequency. Sarcasm, banter, and mild swearing are deeply embedded in the national communication style. British parents speak to their children with a heavy dose of irony. If a kid does something annoying, a British parent might lovingly call them a cheeky little monkey or a right pain. They also do not censor adult conversations nearly as much. You will hear British parents casually using mild swear words in the car while the kids are in the backseat, and nobody flinches. It is not because they do not care about manners. In fact, British table manners are incredibly strict. It is because words themselves carry less moral panic here. There is a cultural trait in the UK where taking yourself too seriously is considered the ultimate social sin. This applies to parenting too. They want their kids to have a sense of humor, to be able to take a joke, and to understand banter. So while an American parent might constantly validate a child's feelings with therapy speak, a British parent is more likely to use a bit of sarcastic humor to diffuse a tantrum. It shocks you at first, but it is actually a very effective way of bonding. And finally, rule number 9, the strict anti-exceptionalism rule. This one is the hardest for an American to process. In the US, childhood is often treated like a high-stakes project. We put our kids in travel baseball teams at age 7 that cost $5,000 a year. We hire private coaches. We want our kids to be the star quarterback, the valedictorian, the absolute best. We tell them they can be the president of the United States. British parents actively suppress this kind of behavior. They have a cultural phenomenon similar to tall poppy syndrome. The idea is that the flower that grows taller than the rest gets its head chopped off. Showing off, bragging about your child's achievements, or pushing your kid to aggressively dominate their peers is viewed as incredibly distasteful. You see this perfectly illustrated in a British primary school sports day. In America, field day is a hyper-competitive event with ribbons and intense parents yelling from the sidelines. In the UK, sports day includes the egg and spoon race, the sack race. It is intentionally slightly ridiculous. The goal is not to identify the next Olympic athlete. The goal is for everyone to have a go, not make a fuss, and eat a piece of cake afterward. This traces back to the British values of modesty and social cohesion. Standing out is dangerous. Fitting in and being a good sport is the ultimate virtue. To an American parent who has been conditioned to fight for their child's exceptionalism, this British attitude can look like a lack of ambition. But when you look deeper, you realize it is actually a profound mechanism for reducing anxiety. British kids are not carrying the weight of having to be extraordinary just to be loved. They are allowed to be average. They are allowed to just be kids playing in the mud, walking to school in their oversized blazers, heading home for a strict 7 o'clock bedtime, and maybe joining their parents at the pub on a Sunday. It is a completely different world over here. It is baffling, it is practical, and honestly, we could probably learn a lot from it.